Within the past couple of months, I've really been getting into the show Rick and Morty. For those who don't know, it's a sci-fi comedy show on Adult Swim that's really funny, and if you haven't seen it yet, I really recommend you check it out. But that's not what I'm here to talk about today. Today, I'm doing a theory about one of the episodes. More specifically, close Rick counters of the Rick kind. This is going to be a theory about the villains of the episode and what their motivations are. Now, as you would imagine, this video will contain spoilers for the episode, so if you haven't seen it yet, then I'd recommend not watching this video until you've seen the episode. Also, if you're planning on checking out this show, please don't make this the first episode you watch. Trust me, you will be lost. Try out something like Lawnmower Dogs for your first episode. That'll give you a good idea. I think I'll start off this theory by briefly explaining the plot of the episode. Okay, one thing in the Rick and Morty universe that I should point out is that it believes in the multiverse theory, which basically means there's an infinite number of alternate universes where things are different. So, as you'd imagine in this show, there are a lot of different versions of, well, Rick and Morty. Basically, the plot of the episode is an evil-er version of Rick and an evil version of Morty go around killing all the alternate versions of Rick and kidnapping all the alternate versions of Morty. The Rick we follow in the series, or as I'll just refer to him as, our Rick, is brought before the Council of Ricks on charges of crimes against other Ricks. Confused? Yeah, I don't blame you. At least to me, this is the most confusing episode of the whole show. It's also revealed here that the Mortys are kind of sold sort of as pets to the other Ricks. And it's in order to keep Rick from being tracked down by certain governments and such. Also, Rick's portal gun history was hacked. Basically, our Rick and Morty end up meeting up with the evil versions of Rick and Morty. Morty is placed in a room with a bunch of other Mortys, and Rick is about to be killed by evil Rick. However, our Morty convinces all the other Mortys to rise up and save Rick. And at the end of the episode, it's revealed that evil Rick was actually being mind-controlled the whole time, and it turns out that evil Morty was the one mind-controlling him. So that brings us to the question, what is evil Morty's motivation for doing all this? Well, I think we should start simple. The first question is, why did he frame our version of Rick? And honestly, this seems like an easy question to answer. It's because the version of Rick that we follow in the show is one of the few of them who's not a member of the Council of Ricks. This would make our Rick a very easy target to frame, as he's not as closely affiliated with the other versions of himself. So now we get to the big part of the theory. Why is evil Morty doing all of this? One thing that says a lot about it is what evil Rick says to our Rick, that a Rick will never care about a Morty. Keep in mind, evil Rick is being mind-controlled by evil Morty. Now, throughout the series, while our version of Rick does seem kind of uncaring and sometimes mean to our version of Morty, it is clear, especially with episodes like Me Seeks and Destroy, that he does in fact care about Morty. However, considering how Mortys are treated in the Council of Ricks building, and considering the fact that there's a version of Rick that actually likes Jerry, chances are there's at least a few versions of Rick that view Morty as nothing more than a tool. It's also important to see what this evil duo does in the episode. They kill the Ricks, but they only kidnap the Mortys. Now, evil Morty probably had the worst version of Rick of all, being really mean and uncaring. Well, you know, compared to the Rick that we see in the show, obviously. Now, my first instinct was to go off of what some of the Ricks said at the end of the episode, how these Mortys would be miserable in life because they wouldn't have a Rick with them, and that evil Morty's goal was to save them all from Rick. However, if that's the case, then why did he kidnap a bunch of them? I think he was trying to start an uprising against the Council of Ricks. Why else would he bring them all here? I mean, the Mortys in this episode are seen holding a flyer called The One True Morty, which is probably something that evil Morty told him about. Either it was intended to be him, or a different explanation. That other explanation would be that the one true Morty was the one we follow in the show. This is infinitely more likely when you consider the fact that this is one of the only Mortys who was never exposed to the Council of Ricks. This would explain the wall of Mortys in agonizing pain, as it would probably be the final straw for our Morty to turn on Rick. Because keep in mind, while Rick said that in order to hide from other Ricks you do need a bunch of Mortys in agonizing pain, he also said that this was incredible overkill, and that you could get the same exact results with only 5 Mortys and a jumper cable. However, Evil Morty's plan failed because our version of Morty still cared at least a little bit about our version of Rick. At first, I didn't really like this episode because it kind of felt like since there were so many versions of Rick and Morty that it kind of devalued the characters. However, looking at it again, it kind of seems like it actually makes the Rick and Morty we know and love stronger. I mean, there is a big theme about these two being the best versions of themselves. At the end, Rick says, "Well, I'm the Rickest Rick out of all of them. It would make sense that the Rickest Rick would have the Mortiest Morty." I mean, it shows that our version of Rick is so self-reliant that he's not even willing to join a government that's run by alternate versions of himself. In Rick's own words, "I'm the only real Rick here. All you other Ricks wanted to hide from the government, and you did it by building your own stupid government." It also shows that our version of Rick is one of the only ones to legitimately care about Morty. As for Morty, despite the fact that most of the time he's wimpy, in this episode he shows that he's one of the few versions of Morty who's actually willing to stand up for himself. Looking back at it, at the end of the day, this still isn't one of my favorite episodes of Rick and Morty, but it's still a good and enjoyable episode. I'm the Fossilizer, and I hope you enjoyed this theory.